What a smarmy looking so-and-so, eh? Good evening, everybody. Justin Trudeau is still politicizing this whole thing and getting away with it, it seems. The Justice Committee met today, voted down another motion to investigate SNC-Lavalin, and Justin Trudeau is on the campaign trail, it seems, talking to people about how the Conservatives don't have anything because they don't have any plan for the economy and stuff. I mean, a plan to stop the bleeding is a plan, but I agree the Conservative plan is lacking. That's why I like Mr. Bernier's plan. Anyway, here's Justin Trudeau talking about how the Conservatives have nothing.
What are they offering? Well, it's just a warmed over version of what Stephen Harper wanted. Focus on balancing the budget through cutting programs and services while continuing to try and find ways to give advantages to the wealthiest. That doesn't work.
The arrogance of him to get up and say this in the midst of SNC. SNC is the definition of crony politics, right? Like my buddy who was a mentor in the Trudeau Foundation, and then I put him into the position of a high-powered person in SNC-Lavalin, and that's a nice golden parachute, right? Pays for everything you need, all sorts of money. And like SNC is trying to be saved by Justin Trudeau and his inner circle by improperly putting pressure onto Jody Wilson-Raybould. And when she said no, he fired her and then said no, she experienced that differently. And he's saying the Conservatives have nothing to say? Arrogant.
So right now they're scrambling. They have nothing to say about our budget. They have nothing to say to propose as an economic plan to go up against ours, so they try to change the channel and play politics. Well, while they focus on us, we're going to stay focused on Canadians, and we're going to keep doing what Canadians asked us to do, which is grow the economy in ways that give a real and fair chance to everyone.
Okay, that's that. So Trudeau is inhabiting his make-believe world and talking to other people about his make-believe world as if it's really the real world. And like his finance minister, Bill Morneau, is one of these people that he's talking about. These people who, he's married to the heiress of McCain Foods. He's got a lot of money, and he shelters his money in Panama, in the Panama Papers. This is a money laundering, money hiding, tax dodging scheme that has been laid bare, and pretty much nobody talks about it. And if you talk about it, you kind of end up dead. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but Morneau's involved in the Paradise Papers. And I think it's really, really inappropriate that we have a finance minister that is using nefarious means to shelter money from tax purposes and for tax purposes. So that's, and Trudeau stands on the stage and says, we're for the little guy. We're for giving everyone a fair shake. Yeah, if you can afford somebody to lobby the government, you get a fair shake. Just like my buddy SNC here, my corporate buddy SNC, right? Like really, the lying doesn't stop at she experienced it differently. He's lying to an entire country and saying, this is my version of reality, and if you don't agree with it, you're racist or something. Unbelievable. So here is the latest in the twisting, turning ride of Jody Wilson-Raybould. It was a year before she was shuffled from cabinet that concerns began about her ability and her judgment, says Trudeau. So this is part of the Whisper campaign. This is CTV reporting yesterday. Relations between Trudeau and Wilson-Raybould began to fray over her Supreme Court pick. Sources. Now I wanted to show you this. Link is in the description. You can read it for yourself. Basically, this is a very bad breach of confidentiality to be leaking all of this, and flies in the face of the conventions that Trudeau says that he's guarding with keeping Miss Wilson-Raybould unable to speak, right? Like not waiving the privilege, keeping her bound up and silenced, and yet at the same time leaking this trash through his media attack dogs. It's really, this is third world. This is really this isn't playing politics in the usual way. I've never seen anything quite this bad. And anyway, here's the CTV article. Quote, relations between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould first began to fray in 2017 over concerns about her choice to fill a vacancy on the Supreme Court of Canada. A year before the cabinet discussions about a plea deal for Quebec engineering company SNC-Lavalin, Trudeau and Wilson-Raybould disagreed about her recommendation of Manitoba Justice Glenn D. Joyal. Sources familiar with the matter tell CTV News. Trudeau was concerned that Joyal wasn't committed to protecting rights that have flown in the interpretation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, particularly LGBTQ2 rights and even abortion access, neither of which are specifically enshrined in the Charter. Wilson-Raybould not only wanted Joyal named to the court to fill vacancy left by Justice Beverly McLaughlin's resignation, she believed Joyal should replace McLaughlin as the top court's Chief Justice, a position that caused Trudeau to question his justice minister's judgment, sources say. And I'll leave it there. We're going to look at an Andrew Coyne piece from the Winnipeg Sun from today, and kind of looks at this smear tactic, because that's exactly what this is. This is a further smear of Miss Wilson-Raybould. It wasn't Scott Bryson leaving. It wasn't anything else. It was her judgment that led to this. But hold on, he just said a couple of weeks ago, if Scott Bryson did not step down, Jody Wilson-Raybould would still be the Attorney General today. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. That doesn't jibe. But Andrew Coyne gets there, so we'll read through what he has to say. He starts with, wait, I thought it was all Scott Bryson's fault. The usual anonymous sources are now whispering to reporters that the reason Jody Wilson-Raybould was fired as Minister of Justice and Attorney General in January had nothing to do with her refusal to kill the prosecution of a Liberal-friendly firm in a province critical to the party's election chances, as the Prime Minister and a phalanx of top officials had pressured her to do. No, according to reports by Canadian Press and CTV, it was because of her pick for a justice appointment or a judicial appointment. It seems Wilson-Raybould, in 2017, recommended Glenn Joyal, Chief Justice of the Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench, to replace the retiring Beverly McLaughlin as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a recommendation Justin Trudeau ultimately rejected. Bilingual, Oxford-trained, a former Crown attorney with 20 years' experience on the bench, Joyal was on the shortlist prepared by the Prime Minister's own, quote, independent, nonpartisan advisory board for the occasion. Alas, it seems he failed some other tests. According to CP's sources, the pick puzzled Trudeau, who became disturbed after doing some research into Joyal's views on the Charter. It turned out he had given a speech to a conservative legal foundation earlier that year in which he had made some mildly critical comments about judicial activism. I scroll down a bit. This is a bog-standard statement of the conservative position on the relationship between courts and legislatures. It is utterly mainstream, but apparently this so disturbed Trudeau that, as CTV reports it, quote, caused him to question his justice minister's judgment. Several points are worth noting about this obviously deliberate leak. One is the casual violation of the very confidentiality provisions that are supposedly so sacred to Trudeau that he cannot fully release Wilson-Raybould even today from their clutches. The second is the willingness in the service of undermining the credibility of the former Attorney General to smear not only her, apparently in addition to being difficult and, quote, in it for Jody, and she's a crazed social conservative, but also a sitting judge. And I scroll down again. The third is the extraordinarily narrow litmus test Trudeau applies. If the stories are accurate to judicial appointments, it would appear to be enough to make one's speech calling for, quote, a true dialogue between the judicial and legislative branches to mark a judge as beyond the pale. And fourth is its implausibility. If a prime minister were compelled every time he disagreed with a ministerial recommendation to replace that minister, there would be no one left in cabinet. In any case, notwithstanding Wilson-Raybould's disturbing judgment, she remained Minister of Justice for more than a year afterward, though the cabinet was extensively shuffled in the summer of 2018. Indeed, she would, quote, still be there today, according to the Prime Minister's previous statement, but for Bryson's abrupt departure from Treasury Board. Still, it's of a piece with a determined push by Liberal partisans to shift the focus from the Prime Minister's efforts to interfere with a criminal prosecution to the character and motives of his accusers. Not only Wilson-Raybould, but Jane Philpot, the former president of Treasury Board. Even respectable surrogates, never mind the seething mobs online, have been brazen enough to suggest the two women are besotted with their own celebrity or are conspiring in some strange and baseless vendetta against the Prime Minister. Journalists compete to be the loudest in their call for the Prime Minister to kick them out of caucus. They're tarnishing the party brand. They're tearing the government down. What's their real agenda? Somehow it does not occur to anyone to ask, is what they are saying true? They are challenged to, quote, put up or shut up, as if the Prime Minister were not still refusing to waive privilege over important parts of the timeline, or as if the Liberal majority on the Commons Justice Committee had not voted to refuse to call Wilson Raybould back to tell the rest of her story. But they can speak elsewhere, Liberal partisans insist. They can ignore their confidentiality oaths or say their piece in the Commons under the cover of parliamentary privilege. About that, can they? As political science professor James Kelly of Concordia University has pointed out, their options for speaking in Parliament are in fact severely limited. They can make a one-minute member's statement under Standing Order 31, or they could speak for 10 minutes in debate on a bill, provided the Liberal whip lets them, or the House could vote to let them speak for a special debate if enough Liberals voted with the opposition to allow it. Catch-22. In any case, this entirely misses the point. The issue is not why don't they speak outside the committee, but why can't they speak in committee? What possible argument can there be against it? Somehow, the issue has become not the Prime Minister's obstructionist tactics, but their own alleged failure to find a way around his obstructions. This has things back to front. It is up to the public office holders to allay all suspicion about their conducts, especially on such a serious matter. It is not up to the opposition, the press, or the public to cut them some slack. And I would agree. Here's Bill Morneau saying that the fate of Wilson Raybould will come down to caucus. That's the first I've heard of that. And a little quick aside, there is, at the beginning of Parliament, they're supposed to vote saying who's got the ultimate power. Is it the party, so the party leader, or is it caucus who gets to choose who gets to stay in caucus? So does it have to be taken to a vote if you want to eject somebody, so the leader becomes just a member of the caucus and gets a vote? Or does the leader get iron fist the ability to eject somebody from caucus? And I've heard and read that the Liberals didn't have that vote, so this is actually not defined for them. I don't actually know, and I don't have a link for that right now, so I apologize for that. But if that's true, and it comes to a caucus vote, I'm sure it can be tied up in legal webs, legal wrangling for a while anyway. Because who's to say the caucus has the power to eject somebody? Do they have the power? Who granted them the power? When did they get that power? And if they got that power, why isn't it the leader's power? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if they didn't have the vote and then somebody wants to challenge the vote, I mean, I guess if you come into the room and expect the caucus to vote and you're playing by that game, then you accept the result, but maybe not. Here's another quick aside. Michael Cooper, MP, is tweeting, quote, the Justice Committee Chair, Andrew Housefather, has indicated that he will redact evidence submitted by Jody Wilson-Raybould. See my letter to him calling for all the evidence to be made public. And here's the letter. I'm not going to read the letter right now. Link is in the description if you'd like to read it. I find it interesting that they're already preparing the public. Don't get too excited, guys. We're going to redact the good stuff, or the personal stuff is in there. Yeah, sure. Redacted. Okay, so the Ethics Committee is about to begin, and they met today, and the majority Liberals voted down the motions to open up an ethics investigation into SNC-Lavalin. So this is Mercedes Stevenson reporting. Ethics Committee about to begin. On the table is a motion proposing another probe into SNC-Lavalin controversy that would see Jody Wilson-Raybould called to testify and a report tabled in Parliament. And I scroll down and it says breaking news. Yeah, breaking. Ethics Committee just voted down the motion to have the committee open a probe into the SNC-Lavalin scandal and call them back. And I'm just gonna read this and then show you the clip. It says, Pierre Poilievre says the Liberals have voted for the cover-up to continue. At Bay and Nate, and that's this guy here. No, that's not him. This guy here, I believe. And he's the co-chair of the committee, and he thinks that there's still more to do But as Mercedes points out, the committee shut this whole hearing down on the 19th. So they said, let us finish our work, but they already shut it down. So Bay Nate is willing to revisit, quote, we want to get to the truth, but there's no reason today to make the decision Mr. Kent wanted us to make, says Justice must be allowed to finish work. Note, Justice has said they have shut down their probe. JWR is submitting more testimony, though. Liberal MP Bay Nate says he doesn't think the Prime Minister should expand. He does think the Prime Minister should expand the waiver to allow at Puglass and Jane Philpot to speak without them having to rely on parliamentary privilege and stand in the House. Okay, and here is the hour and 41 minutes, and this is the vote, and they vote down both motions. I'm not going to play it for you. They vote along Liberal Conservative lines. It's 6 noes, 3 yeses, and sorry about your Justice Committee. And here is Nate, and I'll cue it up. Hold on. Okay, this is Nathaniel. Sorry, I keep calling him Nate. That's just his Twitter handle. Nathaniel Erskine Smith. And sorry, I've got that terribly wrong, but I don't listen to your name a lot, so I apologize. I'm not meaning to mispronounce it. Here he is after committee, after voting down the motion to look into it. He says, no, the committee's still working hard. And I just don't believe they are. I just don't.
I think that's a fair thing to say. I think this question of asking them to turn to parliamentary immunity, I do think it reigns supreme. I do think that there would be absolutely no consequences if they stood in the House and gave their full story. I think that actually is legally true. But I can appreciate, as an individual, when you give an oath and you take that very seriously, that you may not want to break that oath, regardless of parliamentary immunity. And so I think legally my colleagues are right that they could get in the House and speak. But if there is relevant, pertinent information to the issue at hand, that I don't know to be the case, but if there is, then I don't see a reason why we wouldn't extend the waiver beyond that. If that were the only question today, then maybe we would have a different conversation. But today was about undertaking an investigation.
So, and he was saying that there was more than just the one question. So blah 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 blah. But I don't necessarily think that this committee is working to get to the truth. That's the short of it. I don't think the committee is working to get to the truth. I think they're working to cover it up, and I think they have a majority, and I think they've been told to cover it up, and I think it's going to get covered up. So we have to go to the polls. So with that said, check out the People's Party of Canada.ca and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thanks for watching, everybody.